Cool. Well, I'm Allie from O2X, and I am here with Pete Kadushin, who is our mental performance specialist, among many other things, and excited to kind of talk about what mental performance is, hear your take on how people can start to build consistent performance cycles and maybe dispel some myths about sports psychology and about mental performance. But I think right off the bat, to you, how would you define mental performance for people?
Yeah, first off, thanks for having me. Always a great opportunity to sit down and chat. Uh, Mental performance, I think for me, really exists within the bigger context, which is what do you want and how are you doing getting it? And anytime we're thinking about those big picture goals, we're thinking about the tactical, the technical, the physical, and then the mental. Right? And so physically, do you have the capacity, cardiovascularly, strength wise, technically and tactically? Do you know the skills? Do you know how to work in your team? And then that fourth prong is really what's going on between your ears, and how is that either enabling you to get closer to that big picture goal, or how is it holding you back? And so when I work with folks around mental performance coaching, usually what I tell them is my job is to help you build the mindset and the mental skills to help you perform closer to your best more consistently. And so that on a great day, you show up, you play great, or you are in the field and you're taking care of business. And on a bad day, there's not much dip, or there's no dip at all, right? Like you're still at that high level, even as you're tired, low resource, had a argument with your significant other, right? Whatever might come your way in terms of obstacles or setbacks, being able to manage those effectively and still keep your eye on the prize.
Yeah. What are some of those strategies kind of right off the bat for someone who's new to mental performance and new to kind of implementing those tools? I think particularly like personal life versus professional life, or versus going on to the field. When you're working with someone who's brand new to it, what's kind of one of the first skills that you tend to go to?
I think, O2X has it right in terms of where the three key skills are that are taught during the mental performance workshop, and really aiming people towards being able to manage their energy more effectively, manage their attention more effectively, and then turn both of those towards their thinking and build some awareness around that. In terms of like a specific skill, usually where I start is with the end in mind. And so if I can get you reflecting at a higher level, then everything else I think starts to work a little bit better. So I use a simple but not easy technique called good, better, how. And so in 3 minutes, you can sit down and do your after action review. What did I do well? What's one thing I could do better? How am I going to do it better next time? And the magic is really in the how, because I've then given myself that breadcrumb step by step so that tomorrow I know exactly how I'm going to improve. And I think that ends up being the highest point of leverage because it works for getting better at managing my energy, managing my attention. It builds awareness around where my useful thinking, effective thinking is, and where there might be some hitches in my thought process. And I can also apply that to the physical, tactical, and technical as well. And so it ends up paying a lot of dividends for being something that you can do in 3 minutes.
Yeah, that's great. I like that. Good, better, how is I think something we can all do
Well,
more of.
I think what's deceptive about it is that because it's so quick, it feels a little bit throwaway sometimes. And so a lot of the performers that I work with, whether it's tactical athletes, college athletes, they'll do it a couple of times, but yeah, that was all right. What's really meaningful about it is that it's framed in a way that forces you to find the positive. And I'm not big on fantasy positive thinking, right? But reality positive thinking, right? That didn't go the way I wanted it to, and I still did X, Y, and Z that made me effective in that situation. And so that starts to groove not only a growth mindset, but it also starts to build learned optimism, right? And so we're actually training our mind's habits through doing that 3 to 5 minute technique at the end of every day. And it's something that you don't notice because it's like getting older. You look in the mirror and you don't notice that you got a day older. You do your good, better, how, and you've gotten one day a little bit more optimistic. And then if you look back over time, you really get a sense of how the landscape of your mind might have changed.
Yeah, for people, I think what I come up against is that how piece is pretty challenging for people. They kind of know or even identifying what that should be. I think people get pretty overwhelmed with a lot of different things. How do you help kind of narrow in on the one that like one thing that you can focus on the next time around, as opposed to like trying to change everything at the same time?
I think recognizing that habit, that tendency, and this is, I think, the number one mistake that people make when they're doing their after action review, and I'm coaching them through good, better, how, is they'll do like just a little bit of good, or they won't find any good at all, and then there'll be 15 betters, and then you can't pick. When you have 15, you're not going to write out your how for all of those, and then get better 15 different ways tomorrow. And so I think noticing that to begin with, and going, oh, all right, well, I'm really trying to carry a lot with me from today's experience, whether it's training or when I was out in the field. And then from there, trying to really refine the thought process around where's the most bang for your buck. If I change one thing tomorrow that maybe is upstream and then might trickle down and impact a bunch of the stuff on this list, right? Let's talk through it. And even if it takes the first time 15 minutes to go through that list of betters, to really figure out where's your highest point of leverage. I think that becomes a skill set in itself, and that folks tend to get better at over time at picking the one thing that's really going to make a lot of other things easier or help improve those.
Yeah, that's great. One thing that kind of sticks out is I know you have another three-pronged approach, because I think the good, better, how in terms of like a daily change is great. And then when people kind of hit these plateaus, so if you start doing that and kind of see the progress, it's sort of inevitable that things kind of dip and drop a little bit. How do you sort of create that consistent performance cycle so that you may hit those dips or those lows in motivation even after doing it? How do you bring yourself back?
There's a complex question. So I think the framework I build off of is thinking about three different phases of performance, right? And again, for me, performance can be anything across the board that you're trying to excel at or wanting to excel at. So it's not isolated to sport performance by any mean. It certainly fits the tactical athlete population. Right, when I'm standing in front of a classroom or standing in front of a team and I'm giving a workshop, I'm considering that a performance. And so for me, the three phases are preparation, performance, and evaluation. And I think that being really respecting the tasks and the objectives in each of those phases allows you to move a little bit more effectively from each into the next and be prepared. And I think a lot of trouble shows up when I think I'm in performance, but I'm really still thinking prep, right? Or I'm constantly evaluating and I'm never giving myself a chance to step away from that evaluation so that I can just be with the actual performance itself. And so being really purposeful about that, I think, is an important place to start. And talking good, better, how is a great way of thinking about how to create a habit around evaluation and then leave it behind when you're finished, right? Rather than carrying the whole day with you, right? I spend my 5 minutes doing my good, better, how. I know that I've processed that as best as I can, right? I've picked my highest point of leverage. I have my plan. And then that gives me permission to let it go and not have to carry it around. And so I can move on to, if it's time to just enjoy my time with my family, I can do that. Or if it's time to then feed it back around into the preparation phase, I have my how that leads directly into how I'm going to prepare at a higher level next time. In terms of the plateaus and motivations, and I think that part of it is sticking to that framework and respecting those phases, right? But when it comes to the motivation piece, I think that we have a separate skill set that we need to develop. And so motivational flexibility for me ends up being a really important skill. How do I stay motivated when I'm not getting what I want is, I think, the real question. And so I hit a plateau. And so let's say that I'm trying to get a little healthier and I'm trying to lose a little bit of weight, put a little muscle on so that I can feel better when I'm in the field. And so early on, right, as I change my behaviors, I might eat different or I might move a little bit more, right? I'm going to see some success. And then our bodies sort of hit that new equilibrium. And I stop seeing the number on the scale change, or I stop seeing, muscle get added on. At that point, if I'm not getting what I want, I either need to change the strategy in terms of what's going on up here, or I'm going to stop being motivated. And so I think that trying to build with the performers I work with, trying to build in some of that motivational flexibility. Right? If I'm not doing it for, this specific reason, what other reasons might I also include? And I think that then building the habit of accessing that on a regular basis, not waiting until you have to break the glass and press the button for an emergency, but saying like, oh yeah, I'm doing this because I want to look and feel different, maybe, right? I don't want to get as fatigued as fast. I want to be able to contribute more to the team or the squad, right? And it also means that I'm going to live longer and happier and healthier, right? I feel different when I wake up because I've changed my body composition, and that helps affect mood, right? And so it becomes the process of hunting for some of the benefits maybe you've already gotten that help you realize that even if you're on a plateau in terms of progress, you're still getting a lot back for the energy you're putting in. It's just a matter of going hunting for it.
I like that. Hunting for motivational flexibility.
That's right.
That's pretty good. So for someone who's like trying to implement that, so we have good, better, how as one kind of skill and strategy. Is there kind of a skill set or a way that someone can start to build out or figure out what their motivation is and how they can tap into that? So it's a little bit of goal setting probably, but
yeah, it's goal setting, but it's really with an eye towards the foundation that you're building your goals on, right? It's about the why, and then really not just being clear about why I'm doing something, right? But also giving yourself permission to have multiple whys. Sometimes that feels like a bad thing, right? Like I should just be intrinsically motivated to do this, right? I should love it because the guy or girl next to me, they love it, right? They go out and they go for their 5-mile run every morning. I don't have to love it, right? But if it's getting me something that I want, I can have permission to go out and exercise or find a way to be physically active or to eat differently or to manage my stress differently that works for me and that I enjoy. And so I think that part of it is recognizing that it's okay for me to find multiple reasons for something and to try and fit as best I can whatever strategies or techniques I've been given into my life and my preferences as well. And so I think that's part of the skill building piece. And then I also think that to go with the evaluation with good, better, how, and that reflection ends up being really valuable. If I'm caught up and not really pausing at the end of my day to reflect and to evaluate, right, I might miss that I'm feeling a little bit different, that I'm less winded, that my mood has changed, that I'm engaging and interacting with the people around me, whether it's in my professional or personal life, in a way that's smoother or more open. And so if I never pause to pay attention to those, then I miss all of the benefits that were there that I didn't have to do anything extra for. And now all of a sudden that can be added into, here's why I'm doing this, right? Here's my primary motivation, right? And all this other stuff that comes with it that I might not have noticed. And that's pretty cool stuff too.
yeah. I think what's really cool about that and that idea is that all of that bundles into so many other things like gratitude journaling, and there's all sorts of these like different skill sets that seem to all fit together with the way that you're describing that too. Because I think as you start to get a little bit more of a positive mindset, a growth mindset towards one thing, and add in one of those skills, it snowballs with all these other skills that you kind of start to acquire, whether it's finding your motivation and then finding gratitude for it, or building the flexibility to adapt through AARs and through debriefing. It's all kind of in the way that you explain it. It's all part of the same system, which I think at O2X is definitely how we operate, but it's put very clearly by you.
Well, and you really highlight the beauty of mental performance training in that I can do gratitude journaling and raise the level of the system. right? And so because everything's interconnected, I don't have just one entry point into making myself a higher functioning, happier human being. Uh, and so, for folks who are listening to this, it really does come down to what resonates with me, what works for me within the rhythm of my day or the rhythm of my week. But I also think that you pointed to the idea that if you can have that hard landscape, that you've respected those three phases, right? Then whether it's gratitude journaling during that last phase as you're closing things out and wrapping them up for the day, or it's your good, better, how, or it's considering and reflecting on motivational flexibility and what are you getting in return for your energy, right? Like you've still kind of kept that rhythm consistent. And that way you always have that space to return to that for 5 or 10 minutes to pull things together, right? And that again just sets up the next morning to be a little bit higher order right out of the gate, no matter what comes your way.
Yeah, I think that kind of leads into one question that I do have, and the way that you frame that in terms of just like an everyday person waking up to make the best of your day and your ability. I think a lot of times we think of like Major League Baseball, and we think of all these, NHL players, and we think of special operators and things like that who use sports psychology for very specific, like performance based skill, and we kind of forget, as going to the office or kind of showing up at the firehouse, whatever that is, like that's your performance and that's your day. So it's pretty cool to hear just waking up as a day is your performance cycle. I think with that, kind of what's one of the bigger or the biggest like myth or misconception that you come across when people hear what you do for a living and what sports psychology is? Kind of what would you like to dispel for people about what it is?
Wow. I think that what comes up most often is usually like, and this is probably no different than if you talk to a strength and conditioning coach or a PT, people go like, all right, we'll fix it now. Like I have a magic wand, and that the three words I'm about to say are going to totally flip everything that you know on its head. And then you're going to go out and you're going to crush it today. Yeah, I think that it's natural to want that quick fix. It's natural to want the one thing that kind of crystallizes all the hard work that I've already put in, so that I can be a different performer, or I can live with more ease, or I can be happier and healthier. And I think that for better and also for worse, mental performance skills are built just like any other skill, which is through consistency over time. Right. So if I'm invested day in and day out, it doesn't necessarily have to be 2 hours a day. Right. We've already highlighted one thing you could do in 5 minutes that would help then ripple out and affect a lot of aspects of your mind. But it really is about consistency over time. And so I think that, a lot of the performers I work with, they wait until something feels really busted, right? Like this thing isn't working. It hasn't been working. I've tried everything except for consistency over time. Fix it. By the way, I have a big skills test tomorrow, or I have my conditioning thing, or there's a championship coming up. So just know that, but fix it. You're nodding your head like, yeah, I know. This is how it works.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's it's a lot in my mind. It's a lot like injury prevention and how we talk about physical injury. It's like you don't show up to the gym thinking you're going to be able to just do a max deadlift without having spent months, weeks, months building up that strength. And so that mental performance piece really is it's a trained skill set, and you kind of have to practice that
well,
over time.
Here's what's exciting though, right? Like that sounds disappointing at first because everybody wants to just run in and put up like 500, 600 pounds on their deadlift. I get it. And what it also points to is that the best mental performers in the world, got there through a series of systematic steps. And then it makes those higher orders of mental performance accessible to us. Right? We go into the gym or we watch somebody do something incredible on a sport field. We go, oh man, they do that. I don't. But particularly with mental performance, right? We can work backwards from that highest level and go, okay, well, what could I do today if I wanted to be systematic and consistent over time that would allow me to build that type of mindset or those mental skills. Right? So I think it's empowering, but you have to hunt for it sometimes because right, there are even times where I'm like, man, if I could just snap my fingers and be a little more resilient today, like that'd be really nice.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing in there that sticks out is that systematic approach, right? And I think something that is definitely a big part of even my own mental performance training is like it's a lot of trial and error. Um, and you kind of have like one skill might work for one person and not work for another person, and you kind of have to figure out your own where you are on your own kind of place of performance. But for someone who's just getting started with it and looking for maybe a way to measure whether or not the skills that they're putting into place or the things that they're trying to do in their daily lives, how do they help help them kind of measure their success or whether or not something's working? Is there a way to, other than like, do you feel better? Do you feel better every day? Is there something you would tell them to look for in terms of whether or not it's working?
I think what's tricky about the question is that, I believe deeply that our hard work is rewarded, right? Again, mental, physical, technical, tactical, that our hard work is rewarded. And my experience time and again has been that I often get the lessons or the rewards in ways that I didn't anticipate and sometimes didn't know I needed or wanted. Uh, and so, example, I was a wrestler growing up, dislocated my shoulder, ended my career in my senior season, right? So all the hard work I'd put in initially is like, well, that's all wasted. Right, I ended up learning a ton of really, really important lessons about what it meant to be a teammate, what it meant to stay engaged through challenge, right? So I ended up with all sorts of really great benefits that I definitely wouldn't have asked for. And I don't think if anybody had asked, like prepped me in advance for like, how do you know that you're growing right now? I don't think I would have had that capacity in the moment.
Yeah.
And so I think starting from the stance of, right, my hard work isn't going to be wasted and opening my mind to the variety of ways that I might end up being rewarded for the work that I'm doing, I think is an important perspective to take leading into any sort of mental skills training. And I would say any type of training in general. Because if I get really, really locked in, we already talked about motivational flexibility. And if I get really, really locked in and say, I'm only doing it because this, I want this to change. And I get hypersensitive to whether or not I can control my heart rate better because I've been practicing my breathing. But I don't notice the clearing breath that I take before challenging conversations, right? Or the clearing breath I take before I get out of my car to head back in after a long day at the firehouse, right? Because I'm so tuned into, well, do I have that mastery and control?
Yeah.
If I miss the other benefits, right, then I'm going to stop doing it. I'll hit that plateau and think it's not worthwhile. And so I guess I'm giving you an answer that's not a very specific answer because I think that one specific answer ends up being too limited.
Yeah.
Uh, right. And I also think that this comes back to the reflection piece, right? If I can pause at the end of the day and notice what's different, right? I can start to connect what's different with what I've done upstream to make that happen, right? So if I'm sitting and doing breath work for 5 minutes each morning. Well, what could have gone differently when I started to get into that conflict with my boss, or right when something hit and I needed to react to it, and normally my heart rate spikes and I wide eyes and the fight or flight system, but instead I was able to put a lid on that. Well, maybe I miss all of that if I'm not pausing to think about how that's unfolding. And so I guess that would be my answer, is to keep your mind wide open to what the benefits might look like. And then to begin with an attitude of that the hard work is rewarded. And it's really part of my job then, if I'm putting the work in, to find the ways that it's coming back to help me.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think you don't realize it's working until you actually need it, and then it shows up for you. It either shows up for you or it doesn't, and that's it's it's definitely very telling whether or not you've been putting the work. And I think right now it's probably a pretty prime example of being under a lot of stress and kind of how different people are handling it in different ways and able to create those routines when routine is flipped on its head, and
Yeah.
maintain motivation when external factors that typically might motivate you are pulled out from under you. So
I mean,
you know it's working when you need it most.
well, I have a personal example. I've dabbled in meditation sometimes really consistently, and sometimes on and off and on and off, but more off than on. You want to become like the Buddha when you're meditating. You're like, well, I did 10 minutes this morning, so nothing should faze me. And a couple of years ago, I was living in Colorado. I was driving home from Denver, and I was on a 2-lane highway doing 65, which was the speed limit. And somebody pulled out from a side road, didn't see me, pulled out right in front of me, and I ended up riding off the road, flying into a ditch. And when I got out of the car and went through the whole process of calling the cops, getting everybody involved, taking care of all that business, it wasn't until afterwards that I noticed that like my hand was rock solid. I was eye contact. I was communicating clearly, even though I'd just come this close to colliding with like 3 or 4 other cars and then nearly dying. And it was one of those moments where you go, well, where did that come from? But it really came from the time and energy that I'd put in leading up to it. I believe deeply that I wouldn't have been able to handle that the way I did if it hadn't been for the training that I had been putting in and had been doubting, a little bit leading up to it. And so it's not always evident until you need it. And so sometimes it's important to stay committed through those plateaus because you don't know when something's going to show up that you really need to draw on those resources for.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good example, and I'm glad you made it out all right from that one. Yeah, I feel like we could talk for hours. We haven't even scratched the surface of like the physiological responses to stress and HRV and skill acquisition through mental performance skills. And is there any kind of last thing you would want to chat about before we wrap things up for people?
That I have a particular passion for stress and how that influences a lot. And so I think, right now, but given the nature of our world with the pandemic going on, but I think that really just draws into focus how important it is to pay attention to stress in our everyday life always. Is that everything goes better when I can manage my stress effectively. And that's not to say to not have stress at all, right? Like we need stress. Going into the gym and getting your heart rate up or picking up heavy things and putting them back down, that's purposeful stress. Right? Like a lot of mental skills training creates purposeful stress. And so it's knowing when to be stressed and then when to back off and give the mind and the body an opportunity to recovery. Because we just know that from an immune system function, from our ability to process our food, get our nutrients in, and then let go of the waste products, in terms of what goes on between our ears and the quality and quantity of our thoughts, right? That all gets impacted by how we understand and react to the stressful events. And so I would say that like if I could just help wave my magic wand and have everybody doing something different, it would just be setting aside like the 3 to 5 minutes each day to do something relaxing or do something that allows you to ground yourself in the present moment. And it doesn't have to be breath work. It can be, if you're enjoy spending time with your kids, it's just being with your kids for 5 minutes and really being present without being lost in the swirl of thoughts and feelings and everything else. If it's like going for a walk, go for a walk, it doesn't matter. It's just something that allows you to manage that stress response, right? And again, it's something that pays dividends that you don't necessarily see until you need it. Right? Like, how is 5 minutes of breathing or playing with my kids going to make a difference? The challenge would be do it every single day for the next 90 days and then tell me how you're different. And then we can have that conversation. And so I could talk forever about stress response and heart rate variability and the importance of the mental and physical, the intersection of mental and physical skills around that. But it really just comes down to how much time you have.
I mean, I've got all the time in the world. I think we'll make that round 2. We'll have to be we'll jump on the heart rate variability and the skill sets and getting into that.
Sounds great. Sounds
Yeah, this was awesome. I'm like fired up to go set some goals and figure out motivational flexibility. Very cool. Um, we'll close it out with our usual question, but what's your 1% for the day?
My 1% for today is getting outside and trying to get a little bit more sunshine in my life. I've realized now that being outside is pretty important for me. And again, it's come from reflection and recognizing when my days are going well and when they're not. And so right after this, I'm going to put my shoes on and I'm going to get out and I'm hopefully going to. It's not too warm, but I'm going to get enough sunshine to help set the rest of the day up right.
Perfect.
What about you?
My 1% is I've started doing puzzles to kind of get away from screens and just take a little bit of a mental reset. It's my way of being mindful, and so my 1% is at the beginning of every day and the end of every day, taking 5 minutes to kind of bookend the transition between work from home and being home for home. So that my 1%'s been doing the 5 minutes of mindful puzzling.
Awesome. Way to respect those transitions.
Yeah, working on it. It's a work in progress for sure.
We all are.
But cool. Well, enjoy the outdoors, and thanks for sharing all this. We'll be on for round 2 soon.
Amazing. Amazing. Thanks so much for your time.